Okay, this will be just a bit of an update on where we are with this program, but let me just start off. I know we have a lot of non-environmental folks in the audience, and I'll just start off with an analogy, so bear with me. Imagine, if you will, that you own a widget factory, and your employees of that widget factory are very good at what they do. They're highly vested in their widget product as well. Let's say it's an employee-owned factory, so that they are heavily invested in producing quality widgets. And also the delivery time in your widget factory is very critical to your customers. Sometimes you rely on just-in-time delivery, as a matter of fact, on some of your widgets to your customers. And so you've got this widget making process, but there is one step in the widget making process that you have to send the widget out to a vendor. The vendor has to do a QC and a certification of this widget before it can move on into the widget making process and then eventually go out to your customer. And this vendor, he is all-knowing. They are all-powerful, this vendor. As a matter of fact, it is the only vendor in all the land that can approve and certify your widget. But there is a problem with that vendor in that his priorities aren't always your priorities. There's also sometimes disagreement on the quality. What is the spec on this widget? What's the quality of this? They'll disagree, they'll kick it back, and you have to go through the widget making process all again for that widget. And so that highly affects your delivery time, as you can imagine. So this goes on for many, many years. And then the law of the land changes. The law of the land says, widget factory, you can now take on that widget certification process. Widget factory owner says, okay, what do I do? You have to take on all the responsibilities of producing quality widgets. What's like, well, I did that before. Yes, but I'm going to tell you, you have to take on all the responsibilities and all the accountability for making these widgets. And the factory owner says, okay, we can do that. That's what NEPA assignment is. We are taking this outsourcing point in our environmental review process and doing these certifications, essentially the approvals ourselves, so that we are doing what we did before, but we are held much more accountable for our decisions than we were before. As a matter of fact, you know, the lead agency that was the responsible agency, the responsible lead federal agency is no longer in the process. But we gain all those benefits of being in control of the process ourselves. We have control, we have the decision-making responsibility, not just for the certification, but in the whole widget-making process up to that point, to where you have to don't do the coordination and don't do the touch points to make sure that you're producing the widget to the level that your client expects it to be. So NEPA assignment was something that came out of MAP 21 and allowed state agencies to take on the responsibility of the environmental approvals in the NEPA process, and also to be the lead agency, acting as a federal lead agency in coordination with the other federal regulatory agencies. I'm talking about the Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Coast Guard, and some of the other federal agencies that we deal with in the regulatory process. And so TxDOT wanted that. This was allowed for all state DOTs as part of MAP 21. Prior to that, there was only one other state that did this. That was California DOT, Caltrans. They had taken on NEPA assignment many years ago, and it wasn't as big of a change for them because they have a much more stringent state law, state NEPA law that they're required to work under. So I think that was a bit of an easier transition for them to accept that. They also have an army of lawyers, as in 100, 150 attorneys that work in their environmental program that work with their NEPA process. So they transitioned into that over 10 years ago. And so when the opportunity came up with MAP 21, Texas wanted a piece of that. And so we moved forward with that back then. And so we finalized our NEPA assignment, our introduction, indoctrination into the program back in the end of 2014. So Texas was the first state. So just to update you on where other states are on this. Just the end of last year, Ohio came into the program, and then soon after, Florida, Utah, and most recently Alaska have come into the NEPA assignment program to join Caltrans and Texas into this. And so Again, what this is that Federal Highways is now outside of the environmental decision-making for our projects, and we are taking on the responsibility for doing the environmental approvals. And the intent or the motivation for that, and Congress's expectation was that this was a streamlining effort. This was an effort to streamline project delivery. So all of this is in the context of project delivery and getting us to the end, so we can have these projects on the shelf are ready for construction in a more predictable and more consistent time frame. And given what you heard this morning about where we are with the amount of money that we're spending these days and the way we're trying to get very much more organized and prioritized in project selection and committing more so to schedules and following through the projects on a set time frame, it's very important that you maneuver through the environmental process with as much predictability and consistency as you can. So NEPA assignment gives us that ability to do that. And so we are now 2 years, 10 months into the NEPA assignment program to where we've been operating on our own. And we've learned quite a few things. It's been an interesting experience. And so I'll just kind of update you a bit on where we are right now as of today, and again, a little bit about what we learned. A quick story though, I mentioned that it's really a big responsibility, and so that we have to now take on this ability to make legally proper decisions throughout the process. And so a test of that kind of came up probably not 6 months after the NEPA assignment MOU was executed, where we had a project that had gone to a public hearing or was going to a public hearing, and during that hearing notice time, somebody at the district office had noticed that we did not, the newspaper advertisement for the hearing didn't come out when they thought. It came out a day later. So we had cut off a day of the required notice period for that public hearing. Just missed it by a day, and they went ahead and had that hearing. It was too late to change anything at that point, but they realized that the notice period wasn't quite long enough according to our procedures. They went ahead and had the hearing. It was a medium to small size project. The hearing was lightly attended. Not controversial at all. But we at A&V had heard about their notice period being shortened accidentally on this. And so when we heard about that, I contacted the district engineer in that district. And I indicated to him that, I know we made a mistake here, and he had heard about that. I said, the procedures say we have to do this for this notice period, and we missed it by a day. I said, this is really a low-risk project. There was essentially no controversy that was indicated at the hearing. It was lightly attended. It wasn't a big project in the realm of projects in this district. And I asked the DE, what do you want to do? And he asked me a couple more questions about the kind of implications, the responsibilities. And he said, well, let me talk to my people about it, and I'll call you back tomorrow. I got the call back from the next day from that district. And he said, we're going to redo the hearing. We're going to renotice the hearing, and we're going to go back and have a brand new public hearing. I said, excellent. I'm glad you came to that conclusion. And so that's the kind of the responsibility that we're held to, is that nobody else would have noticed had we not republished and had another hearing on that. I feel pretty confident about being pretty safe and risk-free on the decision that would have gone possibly otherwise. But in this case, it's doing the right thing when we're working in that gray area. And I know Pat Henry mentioned this morning, accepting his award, that he sees that extreme difference in dealing with engineering when you can open a book and it'll tell you how to do something, versus on the environmental side, there's so many instances where there's no book to answer your question. And a lot of these challenges that he's noticed in his long career that are totally new to him day in and day out. And so that's the challenge that's the environment that we work in. And so what it is, that responsibility that we have, is that we count on the people working on the front lines on this program to know what they're doing and do the right thing whenever they're faced in front of the opportunity where there's a bit of a gray area and they may be on the edge of compliance or not, that they go ahead and do the right thing. And so with that, I think our program and the people that, and mainly our district people, have really stepped up to that challenge and done the right thing and tried very, very hard to learn what the program is, and implement the program to the highest quality possible. And I think that is really a side benefit of the NEPA assignment program, is that we've stepped up. We're better and smarter than we were 2 years and 10 months ago. And I think we're continuing to learn and continue to find ways to make ourselves better, make the environmental process better, along with the ability to streamline the program, which was the initial intent anyway. And just to kind of show you kind of the breadth of our program, we do a lot in the environmental process. There are a lot of projects that come through. Last calendar year, 2016, we issued 2,157 environmental approvals. These are, obviously, you would think, mostly categorical exclusion level approvals. A few EAs, and I think there might have been 2 EISs last year. But this is again, across all 25 districts, over 2,000 decisions issued. And so we are held to be compliant on each one of those decisions, and actually embedded in each one of those decisions, there are compliant decisions within each one. So there are many decision points that that we're held against that come within that. And so the idea that under NEPA assignment, we're responsible for all those decisions and the decisions embedded within each of those. Just to kind of give you an idea of the level of how many CEs, categorical exclusions, we do. Of that full number, there were 20 environmental assessments that were done last year, environmental assessments that ended up in findings of no significant impact. And just to note, that's down from 32 in 2015, which is odd because the volume of work went up. Essentially, we're using more categorical exclusions now than we were back 3 or 4 years ago, which is just, again, an interesting observation. But here's really where the tire meets the road here, and the streamlining ability that we've been able to note. And to back up and put it in bigger context, if you look at what other federal agencies do in their NEPA process, and here we're looking at the Department of Energy and the Forest Service, their documented EA review and completion times are 13 months and 18 months, respectively. Having done a little work for other federal agencies, I will say and that the Federal Highway, the TxDOT NEPA process is much more complicated than some of these most other federal agencies. I think some of the consultants out there might agree who have done work for other federal agencies. I think the main part of that is that we work much more, we are much more exposed to the public and working in a high-profile environment with transportation projects as opposed to DOE or the Forest Service. And I think that makes our projects much more controversial and more difficult to get through. Anyway, besides that, for federal highways, nationwide, there was a report done several years ago where they documented a 14 to 41 month review time to get through the EA process. We looked at environmental assessments that we had documented prior to NEPA assignment for the 2 years prior to NEPA assignment, and we had documented a 30-month review and review time to get to approval. 30 months, just about 2.5 years, with a median of 26 months. And so we started tracking projects after December of 2014, looking at EAs that we have started and completed since that time. So we got the full benefit of NEPA assignment from the beginning of the EA process. And our most recent time frame on that is 17 months to get through the EAs over the past 2 years, 10 months that we've been doing this. What is the number? I don't have the number on there. I think it's like 20, 25 EAs that we've done in that period, or closer to 30. Anyway, so we've cut down that time almost by half up to this point. And so I think that's obviously a pretty substantial achievement, along with, again, being able to, the added benefit of what we think is improving the quality of these documents, but also which I think is more critical, the ability to predict and be more consistent in our process. We still run into the usual issues with our environmental process being the regulatory hurdles that haven't changed, be it 404 permits or consulting with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those things are still out there, and they will still take their due time. Controversial projects will still be controversial if the public is against the project. It will still be hard to get through these things in a reasonable amount of time. But I will say this, that if we want to put a priority on things, we can really step on the gas. And if there are other agency approvals, the EA process should easily be less than 12 months. If there are no other external push forces on the project, relatively non-controversial, we can really step on the gas and move projects along. And that's the real added benefit, because not all projects are time sensitive, not all projects are critical path to get to letting. But we know that they come up often enough that we can look at a schedule and say, looking at what you have ahead, I feel comfortable saying, or somebody will feel comfortable saying that 18 months to get through the EA process, or 20 months, or whatever it may be, depending on what's involved, that we can feel good about that. And again, going back to what we talked about this morning, the delivery of so many projects and being able to deliver on time, where we're at with this broad portfolio of projects, not just broad, but very expensive portfolio of projects, that when we commit to a project that we want to let go to construction or let to construction in 2019, well, they're looking to the environmental process like, okay, well, how long is it going to take? Are you sure about that? Because we're going to put it and we want to stick to 2019. That's the deal with our project delivery process, is that we want to commit and stick to these dates that we're talking about. And we feel much better about that. And this was really the ultimate test of what we do under NEPA assignment, is legal compliance. And we had a presentation on that earlier this afternoon. And I won't go through the details because Doug covered all that. But again, this is the ultimate test. We do get audited by Federal Highways, and they come and look at our program with a fine-tooth comb, and and they'll critique us on what they find. And so we'll take that into account. But really, the ultimate test has happened once so far, and that is a federal court legal challenge where somebody who didn't like us in our project went through and questioned all of our ability and our decision-making in the environmental process, and which was somewhat offensive to me, and I'm sure a lot of our staff. In the court trial, the plaintiff's attorney indicated to the judge, saying that, and by the way, Judge, TxDOT is really new to this, so they don't really know what they're doing. So that's why they're making all these mistakes that I'm talking about here in our complaint. Terribly offensive. It was hard to sit in our chair and listen to that, but that's what they blamed. They've only been doing it for a little while. They just got this responsibility, so they don't know what they're doing. So again, it was very gratifying to hear the court come back with what they said and how they said it. All right, so again, the benefits of where we're at with this is again, the predictability and the more consistency in the program, for one. And that's because, it's not that, Federal Highways was there and they have expertise, but it was mostly a duplication of what was going on. We would take our documents, we would send them to them, they would come back to us with comments. And sometimes the comments would actually catch things. Sometimes they would just be a redundancy of our reviews. And so we remove that, and you save a lot of time. And I've been in this kind of work for nearly 30 years. And NEPA assignment, there's no other real streamlining initiative that I've seen, at least for the transportation programs, that compares to what NEPA assignment has done and can do. If you have the ability as a state to do these reviews, the expertise, you really don't need Federal Highways there. You can conduct this on your own and save a whole lot of time, as we're showing. California, by the way, had indicated their time savings for EAs at 25%, a 25% time savings prior to their NEPA assignment and after. And I expect that we'll maintain this 33% time savings as we move forward. And also, I've mentioned the other benefit of, we've really stepped up and we've gotten better at what we do. And I think we produce a better quality document today and consistently across the board, across the state, a consistent document that I think is better than what we did before as well. And so I think the product has improved as well. And I think with that, I'll stop it there. And yeah, that is it. Take any questions if anybody has any. Other than that, we're out a few minutes early. Yes.
What are some of the most common roadblocks or risks to fixing EA? Have y'all a database of some of the more common risks?
Yeah, the question had to do with what are some of the more common risks or problems that we come up against in, let's say, an EA document. Yeah, it's really across the board. I think for starters, it's controversy. Public opposition to a project certainly makes things more difficult from the get-go. Then they're going to push you into probably looking at other alternatives. They're going to question issues and design and your layout of the project at each public involvement stage. And so that makes you go back to the board and respond to those comments. And so opposition is a big hurdle. And I mentioned the other regulatory agencies that get involved if we have a Section 404 individual permit, tag on a year, if not more, automatically. Similar if you have a consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, tag on 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year to get through that. And so whatever regulatory hurdles. I think that those are really the big ones, things that are outside of our ability to control. I think one of the things that we try to do better at these days that was in the past a bit of a problem was scoping early on, making sure that our consultants and the project team are understanding what is involved in delivering this project at the beginning of the EA process. So we scope it properly. We don't get sidetracked on relatively non-relevant issues. And so I think that's something that was a stumbling block a while back, but I think we're getting better at these days. Thanks. Any other questions? If not.
What is the status of FHWA audits?
The status of FHWA audits. Let's see, we just got the final report from last May's audit. We just got the final report a couple weeks ago that was published in the Federal Register. Not going to try to recall the details of what they pointed out. So now we're at an annual audit with Federal Highways, and so they will come back next spring and do another audit of us. You recall the number of non-compliant points that they... Is she up here? Oh, there she is. Three? Three, yeah. So they pointed out made 3 points or observations of non-compliance from this year's audit. And so we'll be getting ready for the other one next spring. And that will be their last one. After 5 years, they're done with the audits. All right. I think we're done. Y'all have a good afternoon. Thank you.